Hi, good evening, everybody. So nice to see you here. We have got snacks at the back. Please have them and bring them along with yourselves up to the front. Please make an effort to try to fill in the spaces in the front so that we have a more packed audience so that we can reach out. We would like to start this event as soon as possible, so we're in another 10 minutes. Please do be sitting here. The reason I've been pressurized enormously because some of our colleagues said they're competing with the Morocco World Cup debut. I think after this, we are all trooping down to Radisson Blu on the second floor where they've got screen set up so we can all join them and watch that game. So please do have your snacks and then I will bring them up and then I can start the event at 19:15, 7:15 promptly.
Everyone has the right to effective healthcare and a well-functioning health system. Africa has made great strides in accelerating the major challenge of increasing access to medicines through various public health interventions. However, about half of the population in the poorest places still do not have access to safe, efficacious and quality medical products. Local pharmaceutical production remains low, with only about 2% of consumed medicines being locally manufactured in Africa. About 25 to 30% of medical products are substandard and falsified, and illicit trade in pharmaceutical drugs remains persistent. This poses a series of threats to public health. Now, more than ever, it's time for change that will ensure African people have quality of life, sound health, and well-being, a priority area in the African Union Agenda 2063. The African Medicines Agency, or AMA Treaty, was endorsed in February 2019 by African heads of state as part of the journey towards an internationally recognized and well-established regulatory authority on the continent. As an organ of the African Union, legally mandated by member states, AMA's goal is to increase the availability of safe and affordable medicines and other health products on the continent. This will be achieved through providing regulatory oversight of selected medical products as well as promoting regional and national cooperation and harmonization of regulatory decisions. AMA will also support the growth of local pharmaceutical companies, opening up and expanding markets across Africa, which is one of the key objectives of the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Working across 55 AU member states, regional economic communities and regional health organizations, the African Medicines Agency will coordinate and strengthen ongoing regulatory harmonization in the following ways. Firstly, AMA will evaluate medical products for the treatment of priority diseases as determined by the African Union. It will also regularly inspect, coordinate and share information about products that are authorized for marketing. AMA will coordinate joint reviews of clinical trials applications for vaccines, assessment of highly complex product dossiers such as biosimilars. AMA will also coordinate joint inspections of active pharmaceutical ingredients, API manufacturing sites. By developing common standards and regulations, AMA will also be responsible for harmonizing legislation. For the health and well-being of our people, let us take this further by establishing the African Medicines Agency. AMA must be ratified by at least 15 member states in order for it to come into force. We call on all African governments to ratify the AMA Treaty and endorse the transformation of our continent's pharmaceutical industry and health systems. With this support, the establishment of AMA will reach fruition. Contact the African Union for more information.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Could we just have yourselves sitting here, the ministers here with us, and the delegations that are going to be sitting with us all present. Please do come forward. Please occupy most of the vacant seats here. We do want your participation in this. As I said, it's a very important topic. It's a topic that the International Alliance of Patients Organization has been chasing for almost 5 years. When the first draft of the treaty was signed or was presented to the African Union in 2017, we promptly held our meeting in Entebbe. We held what is called the African Medicines Agency Treaty Alliance meeting in Entebbe to discuss how can patients help with this initiative, this Pan-African initiative. And one of the reasons for pursuing this was that as an international alliance, IAPO has firm footing in many of the regional continents and regional regulatory bodies and their experiences. So we were relying mostly on our European Medicines Agency work with the European Patients Forum, where we actually participated vigorously and meaningfully in all the activities, regulatory, administrative, even communicative, and even to some point of functions, social functions of integrating that agency within the lives of patients in Europe. And we had the same vision for this African Medicines Agency, that it will become part of our lives. As a Kenyan colorectal patient, I think the importance of this to me personally is very important. That I would like to see my regulator to be part of my life. I don't want to be seeing the distance between them and me. It's very important to be part of that. Make sure the regulators are accessible to me. In the European Union, where we're based in London, we regularly work with the European Medicines Agency in good times and bad. As we saw during the pandemic, it was one of the best functioning we had to have that. Now, it's my honor to firstly invite Dr. Yvonne Butere to come and say something on why the African Medicines Agency is important for Africa, but also as Rwanda is the hosting country for it, why it's important for Rwanda to showcase this in that. Then I will follow that through to the second speaker, which will be Ambassador AMATA Samatev, who is for the Commission of Health and Humanitarian Affairs at the AU. And I will try to bring some insight into why the African Union has thought it's very important for them to bring this agency on. It's very much like the European Union, why the European Union in its early stages thought an European Medicine Agency was important for them. Its life became as an economic tool. It was encouraging free trade across Europe, and it was one of those instruments that then rapidly became, took a mind of its own and became much more than just an economic measure. As you know, we have got an African free trade agreement subsisting now. I think the African Medicine Agency can play a lot of part in that as well. That just as Europe started to encourage free movement of quality, safe drugs across Europe in one soup, this could be another one. Then I will have an excellent panel. I will invite them as the time comes. Before that panel, we have got Lolan Gong from the AMREF, Chief of Staff and Acting Group Programs Director. We have had a close cooperation with AMREF, and AMREF has been very supportive of what we are doing and have engaged with us throughout our journey, right from 2017 onwards, especially at the World Health Assembly, where they really kind of put some muscle behind it and got us to the reach of every African health minister there to come and attend our function. After Lolan Gong, we will have our panel, which will consist of Amina Diop, who is the Senior Advisor on Public Health Policy, Sanitation and Financing for Speak Up for Africa. Again, Mamina, oh, sorry, my apologies. Maimuna Diop has been very instrumental in shaping and mentoring all the patients, because we were very much unaware of some of the nuances of an African Medicines Agency, and she is, with her intellectual and caring and personality, really brought us into it. Secondly, John Paul Omolo will be my second panelist. John Paul Omolo is one of those policy managers who says little, but when he does take something on, he really says what is accurate. I love him for that particular point. He brings clarity. He will wait for you to finish saying. He's a very good listener. And then when he says his piece makes clarity. He's like lifting a fog of Mount Kilimanjaro, and it just washes away. You see the peak, and then you realize, that's what we've been aiming for. 2.5 hours, and it's 5 minutes, and we see the peak. Then, patient like myself, supporting patients, John Kigonyo, also part of the Kenyan Renal Patients Society of Kenya. I think we are both of, organ failures, and that both patient advocates who are really emphasizing that this is not a political endeavor hovering on us, as many of the Pan-African institutions may be. This is us, it's in our heart. In Swahili, it's a matter of moyo. So we keep that in mind. Next is my very good friend, John Mwangi. Again, John has been with us time after time. He has been the ICDRA, International Conference of Drug Regulators Authorities, traveled with us from Cape Town to Dublin to here. He's been part of that African harmonization process that has been going on, and trying to bring in that word. Both he and I were talking about how this journey started. It started with one single step, but a lot of talking. We were building confidences. And in Africa, which was at loggerhead, you must remember that 10 years ago we had such unstable environment. And in that unstable environment, we were bringing everybody together, talking, and many of us began to do. So as a regulatory affairs and quality affairs for the International Federation Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, it's very important to bring this body into it. During the pandemic, we saw what happened. No one person could have solved it. We all had to work together. The manufacturers, the regulators, the CDC, we all had to work together and learn under patients. Then my fifth speaker on the panelists is Professor Amani Sharif. Professor Amani has at her heart that future for Africa. As a Vice President of the Pan-African University's Regional Director, Association of African Universities, she brings in that clarity to us. How are we going to go forward with this? What are the things we have to do, make this agency really good? Feedback and be responsible and be attached to the students. Because as in the European Medicines Agency, which has established links across Europe on all the main universities and created a program from what is called from undergraduate right up to PhD to jobs at the end, we would like to see that happen at the African Medicines Agency, so that Kigali becomes a center of excellence for education, bringing in talent, making sure African graduates don't seek out employment elsewhere. We will have a high-quality agency here for which they can work. Then looking at David Fagan, he's the chairperson of the International Pharmaceutical, Pharmacy Students Federation of Africa region. Again, very important for us that he is here. This is Young Africa. And last, Jacqueline Carey, who is a regional program manager for Health Security Unit at AMREF. And Jacqueline and I have been talking about how AMREF started at a simple airport. And when I was a little child, I used to walk across a corner of the Nairobi National Park and into that Wilson Airport and look at these planes land, and I used to wonder who is this? And jokes was, in earlier days, it was hunters who had shot themselves or others. Then it became car accident victims, and then malaria, cerebral. So they've seen MREF has seen itself grow as well. We would like to see the agency grow as an MREF. So without much ado, Rachel, I would now ask the Minister of Health for Rwanda, Dr. Ivan Butere, to come and speak to us and give us with pride and joy that Kigali is hosting the African Medicines Agency. You're the first shot. What I've seen today, we picked good. We picked good.
Distinguished delegates, good evening. I would like to start by thanking the organizers of this important side event today. And Rwanda is very happy to host the African Medicines Agency and is fully committed to avail a conducive and supporting environment for its operations. The success of AMA will be the success of Africa. The AMA Treaty, as adopted by heads of state and government during the 32nd Ordinary Assembly in 2019 in Addis, aspires to enhance capacity of state parties and African Union recognized regional economic communities to regulate medical products in order to improve access to quality, safe, and efficacious medical products on the continent. AMA is meant to go beyond pandemics. As a continent of more than 1.4 billion people, which literally is about close to 20% of the world population, relying on medical products and health commodities produced almost entirely on other continents is not a situation we want to persist. Additionally, every year in Africa, millions of people die from preventable causes due to falsified and substandard medicines. This is a stark reminder on why we need strong medicine regulatory agencies in our own countries, and to have AMA at a full functionality as soon as possible is of utmost urgency. As of November 4th, 2022, the AMA Treaty has been ratified by 23 member states, while in total 30 African member states have signed the AMA Treaty. Strengthening the position of AMA through buy-in from non-state actors and regional operation is also of priority. As I conclude, let me reiterate that to achieve the Africa we want, a strong, united, resilient, and influential global player and partner, we need to work together and champion initiatives as the African Medicine Agency to enhance access to quality medicine and health commodities. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. It's very clear. The commitment is there. We'll have a world-class beating organization here, Pan-African. The second, what Your Excellency has really put is that the sun, this new dawn, a new sun, isn't rising from east or west. It's rising from the center heart of Africa. And we're so pleased to see that. Thank you very much for hosting that agency. And we will continue seeing. I think you're always welcome, and I'm sure we'll be welcome. Our meeting will be consistent over the years to come. And let's make a healthy Africa. Now I'll ask the speaker from Ambassador Aminata Samate from the Commission for Health and Humanitarian Affairs at the African Union to say a few words, because this is an investment of the African Union to bring everybody together. It's like the European Union. I was so glad when this idea was proposed. I said, African Union has come of age. I think, thank you for this gift to us and for Kigali. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much. And I would like, first of all, to say thank you to the representative of Rwanda. We are happy to be here. And also, it's my first time to talk about about AMA in Kigali. Kigali is going to us, our baby. The baby is trying to walk, and we are happy to see the offer of Rwanda. It wasn't easy for us to choose a country, but Rwanda was the best. It wasn't easy for me personally because it is about health issues and the interest. We have initially 13 countries, but finally we have one. It wasn't easy in Lusaka, but we did it. Thank you to Rwanda. We are working now with Rwanda to sign the OS agreement, and maybe I will come back soon for that one. And I was working with the minister and your team. I would like to say thank you to the organizers of today's event, because when I see the team, the African Medicine Agency, a key prerequisite for effective pandemic preparedness is very important for us. I want to come back on what my brother of Rwanda said, the importance of AMA for us. Coronavirus, before this pandemic, we realized that we don't have something, an agency. And member states decided 2019 to go to the treaty. Finally, we have it. We have the AMA ratified. We are still working to have all of African 55 countries ratifying this important treaty. And coronavirus showed us the necessity to harmonize. It's very important. If we don't harmonize our legislation, it might be difficult. And we talk also about fake medicine. Fake medicine is killing. A big killer in Africa. We have many victims. We need to produce also in Africa. Harmonizing, yes, we cannot do that one without our member states, yes, but our regional communities, we need to cooperate with all of them and to be sure that we will have the Africa we want with agency, very important agency working properly, and we cannot do it without the support of all of you, include all partners. Thank you very much. I will be ready for questions. I don't want to be too long because we will be listening. We need to learn from them. We need a lot of takeaway, and I'm ready for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. I think that's a kind word. I think I need to go back, pick up on your word on our baby. And I think it was a location foretold, Minister. When we chose the word AMATA means milk. And we were that milk for that baby, it was all the African Medicines Agency, Treaty Alliance. Somehow we had foretold the future. And AMATA is milk, so this is the baby that will feed on our milk, and we will nurture it to health. And the reason why I was not cutting short or not being rude, because all of Africa today is now sitting on the second floor of Radisson Blu, waiting on Morocco to do something magic for us. So I don't want to stand between you and Morocco. It's a dangerous place to be. So I will proceed. Could I now ask Lolan Gong to come over and say a few words on AMREF? And then I think I shared with Lolan about growing up watching AMREF grow to such beautiful things. Lolan, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I now feel pressure to be done in less than 2 minutes, particularly because Cameroon was very proudly kicked out of the World Cup, but I feel like we won, but that's okay. I'll be very brief. I just wanted, on behalf of AMREF, to really, first of all, express our gratitude to the government of Rwanda, Honorable State Minister, and to also acknowledge the immense support that we've had from the AU. So thank you, Madam Ambassador. and to really say how proud we are that we actually have a regulatory body, and to encourage us, and I hope that's what will come up in this discussion, the importance of really operationalizing this body. Some people may ask why AMREF was a huge advocate for this. One, there are three things. One, communities. One, primary healthcare. Two, primary healthcare. And the third, pandemic preparedness. We had a session this morning, and Dr. Chikwe, whom a lot of you are probably familiar with him, said, we can't separate PHC and pandemic preparedness because they are critical elements of UHC. And for us to ensure UHC, we talk about access to equitable, affordable, and quality health services for you, for me, for our communities. And those services include safe medical products. So regulatory bodies such as AMA enable access to those same safe medical products, which we need. I remember as a little girl when we would visit my grandmother in Cameroon, my chore was to ensure that when she went to the pharmacy, that I would check the expiration date on medicines. And I remember that so clearly. I must have been like 7 or 8, and that habit has remained with me. The first thing I do is I'm always looking at the expiration date. And so I say that to really maybe simplify the importance of AMA. It's not some big thing that sits over here, but it's really important to those of us, to you, to myself, to all the people we serve in our communities. So I will close with saying, one, we cannot speak of pandemic preparedness in the absence of a regulatory system. We cannot sustain pandemic preparedness in a vacuum. And so there must be, I come back to this marriage of PHC and pandemic preparedness, at the center of which is our communities. It's all of you, it's me, it's everyone we see walking out in the halls. It's not some elusive number. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lolam. I think was now could I ask the our prestigious panel to come and join me here? Could I have Maimuna, John Paul Olomo, John Kikonyo, John Paul Omolo, sorry, John Mwangi, Professor Mani, David Fagan, and Jacqueline Kyrie. Please do sit down on the seconds. Yes. Good, thank you. Good. Okay, let's start off. I think we will begin the session with having, first is Maimuna. Maimuna, do step out and talk about why is this agency important for us for pandemic preparedness? Why is it central to what we are trying to do?
Thank you very much, Kawaldip, and good evening to everybody. Yes, I think that it's a very important question why AMA is so important. And as we are talking today about issues of regulation, what I would like to say, first of all, is AMA will really help to have appropriate reforms for harmonization and improve performance. Because if you want to have good harmonization, you need to have reforms. But AMA will really help to coordinate also existing regulatory harmonization, because we already have some existing harmonization that are ongoing in the different region and different regional economic communities. They already have also strategies on the pharmaceutical sector, but we need to do more, and we learn a lot from the pandemic. So one example I can give is just for this opportunity for regulation is, for instance, in West Africa, where we have a sub-regional economic community bodies, which is the West African economic and monetary community, where they issue guidelines for Francophone Africa, saying that we need to have autonomous regulatory agency, because in the past all these agencies were belonging just to the Ministry of Health, but now we want them to be really autonomous. And we know that in different countries like Senegal, Benin, Burkina Faso, they already were able to put it in place. The second aspect is really this issue of regulation is in line, for instance, for West Africa, that I know better and where Speak Up Africa is working, is there was in 2019 an Abidjan declaration on how to boost the pharmaceutical sector and especially local production of medical products. And in this declaration, it was really about harmonization for regulation, access to market, and it was really in line with what we are talking today about. The other aspect that I would like to just develop is the need, when we are talking about harmonization and regulation, is also the issue of innovative technologies, because we need it really where we are talking about medical product. And we need through that also to support regional procurement pool for better access to medicine. As you may know, in this different region, we are working on having procurement pool. It's also just to rationalize, and it's in terms also of cost, it will really help to have affordable cost. And we do have in this different region some example about that. Another thing that I just would like to mention also is at national level we have all this food and drug administration, and but we do not have many review system, which is part also of the monitoring, because when you have regulation in place, you need to have also strong monitoring and evaluation framework. Unfortunately, it's not really the case in these different countries, and we need really to be more efficient and also to come up with some sustainable development plan regarding also this aspect. Another aspect that I just would like really to point out is the issue of access to market. We are now producing in Rwanda, in Senegal also, this vaccine, but how are we taking the opportunity of the African continental free trade area just to help to ensure that these vaccines, this medical product, it will be available in Africa, and even African countries will come and buy them. So it's really a critical aspect that we need to see and see really how we can leverage this African continental free trade area. And it will really help to build also resilience of this supply chain pharmaceutical sector, and we need really advocacy regarding this access to market. For me, it's really important. When I came, I saw that all of us, we went through COVID-19 testing, and we know that in some countries they already started to have to produce COVID-19 testing. But if you see most of the tests in Africa, we are still importing them, and the question is why. But that's why we need really to have a good study on access to market, how it will be, what are the main challenges, and if we know them, how to mitigate these challenges to ensure that even if we have a good local production, we'll be able also to sell in intra-regional and also between the different regions. And my last comment will be about this maturity level 3, because in terms of harmonization, one of these reforms and this regulation is really to help countries to have access to maturity level 3. And it's a long process also with WHO, and we know that many countries, they are still at maturity level 1 or 2, and many efforts should be done. So we need to have, again, advocacy. We need to really enhance our advocacy efforts just to support these countries, and What I can say is for Speak Up Africa, it will be really what we would like to do, just to support, to ensure that more countries will ratify. As a civil society organization, it's also really our role to push on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mamouna. I think you've really sketched out that picture that we needed, how AMA will strengthen our national regulatory services as well, how it will bring us all together, pull us all up together. I think that's something that's really come. Now to go to the other end, literally on this panel as well, but also from a point of view of from the enforcement. I'll go over to David. David, the question for you is that how will AMA enhance supply chain resilience and prevent substandard and falsified products from reaching the patient? I'm worried about that. What's your opinion? How will we work?
First of all, thank you for inviting the youth, because it's really important for us to share our point of view with those who are taking decisions and talking in front of decision makers actually. So for us, we as future healthcare actors and leaders, we believe that after seeing all the things that have happened during COVID-19, we have discovered that there was some leak, we can say, in the healthcare system in terms of availability of simple drugs. And we have trust that as youth in our regions or in our countries, we have been doing a lot of actions, but it didn't have the impact that we were hoping. And we believe that through the AMA, there will be a centralized way informations where we can all have the informations and the availability of drugs that are available for people, and for us, for us as students, how we can be encouraged, how we can have a regional center of excellences, how we can be strengthened as youth and bring new ideas and have them implemented within the region. And also, something I've been seeing personally, and is the moment when the director of WHO, Dr. Taylor, saying that health is a human right. For myself, I've been thinking, how can we have health if even the simple medicines we can have, we don't master how we can have it, how we can make sure that all our population can have the simple drugs and fight against the diseases and then have the simple health. And I would just say that we have to be part as your pharmacists, as future pharmacists of all the healthcare system, not only taking us when we will be done, we'll be working at the community pharmacies. Pharmacists is one of the people who are facing the patients when they are having diseases, and we need to make sure that we are all integrated in this healthcare system, and it's passed through the management of all those drugs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I think you've really put some very good meat onto these bones now. What we have seen that in the Fight the Fakes Alliance, which is established from Geneva, which we are members, the students are a big part of that Fight the Fake Alliance. And many of the universities really take part every year in our campaign to fight the fakes. And the universities in Africa joining that with universities in Europe, universities in Latin America. And it's so nice to see that happening, that student motivation for health is really there in Africa. And for that question, I'm now going to go to Professor Amani, because I think the student motivation we have seen in Fight the Fakes and their generation And from our first declaration in Entebbe, the missing component we had there, which we want to rectify for this declaration in Kigali, Professor Mani, how will AMA benefit and support the emergence of centers of excellence of research and also support in the capacity building of this for collaboration with the academic universities? As you know, as with you now heading as a vice president of the Pan-African University, regional director of African universities, what is that you see happening? In Europe, I can give you an example that most of the universities are now linked in so deeply, their tentacles within the European Medicine Agency, it's almost difficult to price them out. They have to share this and develop innovation. Professor Amani, how do you see those centers of excellence developing and the curricula changing and that new, fresh green shoots emerging?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kaldib, for having me today, and actually being served in different capacities, I would like to reflect in a multidimensional perspective. Actually, I think that AMA and the academia as a whole should have a dynamic relation with bi-directional relation. Okay, so I think academia can support AMA in terms of education, research, and expert exchange. Backing to the goals of AMA, two goals I selected to comment on. One is making evidence-based scientifically regulatory decisions, and second one, provide effective, safe, quality medicines for patients. I think academia, including higher education institutions, including Center of Excellences, including research centers, can support AMA for effective pandemic preparedness. Why academia can do that? Because academia already has the innovative centers and the entrepreneur hubs, have the medical schools, they have the academic hospitals, have the research strategy, and it is easy to include protocols, for example, for orphan medicines, for repurposing of some medicines. And I would like to stress on one of the examples. African Union 10 years ago decided to establish Pan-African University. And for anyone who didn't know what is Pan-African University, it is the flagship academic arm of the African Union. And the university is for postgraduate studies, and it contains of 5 institutes distributed all over Africa. Every institute hosted by one country in one geographical region. We have one in Algeria for North Africa, and we have another one in West Africa, in Nigeria, and in Cameroon, and in Kenya, in East Africa, and also in South Africa. All these institutions provide full scholarships for elites, youth of Africa, because we believe in African Union that Africa couldn't reach the aspirations of the Africa Agenda 2063 unless youth become responsible and in the front. In each institute, we have innovation hub, and most of the students graduated by having patent in their field of specialization. For example, I have just came from Kenya, heading the graduation of our students there in the Institute for Technology and Innovation, and I was amazed by the patents. For example, one of the patents was a recombinant peptide for treatment of lung infection bacteria, highly resistant bacteria. And all of us know, of course, is that the pipeline for new antibiotics is stuck and closed. And what after, my question, what after having this patent? What should we do? The answer is AMA. AMA can support youth and the research center and the academia to convey and transform the innovations to new methodologies, new medicines, and on the other hand, AMA can support also in advising the academia to how to modify and develop the curricula to have a global class or international class pharmaceutical industry through building the capacity of the youth, and also building capacity through training. AMA can provide training for our youth. So AMA can fill the gap of what we call the deficient in skills of the current graduates in pharmacy. Actually, if I speak about how we can collaborate as academia and research center and center of excellency with AMA, we have a lot of suggestions in this way. Also, AMA can form task forces, can form networking with specific groups, and academia can provide them with the expert, with the scientist, so we can make a shortcut in our implementation, in our execution of AMA activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mani. You really put in. I think these the first three speakers were what I call the solid, dependable what's called last stop. These are the people who would make sure that things don't go back. But we do need strikers. I think, using the football parlance, we do need strikers to implement this. So I will go to my first striker, John Mwangi from IFPMA. John, how can AMA speed up access to vaccine and innovative products? How can it help bring African pharmaceutical industry to the global arena? We have been a net consumer of IPRs. What I mean by that is we are paying huge amounts in Africa on licenses. We are paying huge amounts in royalties because we don't have anything that we are making ourselves of world-class beating origin. We want to change that. We want that to come through the African Medicines Agency, that our own world-beating vaccines and pharmaceutical products. Over to you, John. How do you see that happening?
Thank you, Chair. If I may speak, especially from the perspective of the pharmaceutical industry, is that we see AMA as a culmination of a long journey, which has taken quite a number of years, eventful, I have to say, of regulatory system strengthening, because that's one of the catalysts for the growth of the pharmaceutical industry, for instance. But in line with that, especially speaking about regulatory system strengthening, because this is one of the things that we will see out of AMA, and it is characterized by some of the things that many in the room have been involved in and are aware of, such as convergence, discussion, and harmonization. We have also seen the growth in what we call scientific or science-based kind of decisions, and moving away and away from what was there previously, which was very administrative processes which are very country-specific. So because of that, we also foresee a situation where AMA and its organs, and also working with the other African Union organs, will provide a platform for practicing some of the good regulatory practices, including utilization of reliance practices. Today, reliance practices are there, and if you ask around the room, most of the health authorities are still in the process of adopting in one way or another, but it's still not there yet. And most of the time it's because there's no the right framework to do this. And we see that when AMA is in place, one of the pillars actually of how AMA will work, and I'll get to it shortly, is the utilization of reliance practices. But besides that, there's also the topic of access. And I just want to share two examples. There's a recent study, now it's a couple of years back, that tried to look how long does it take between when one innovative medicine gets approved, let's say in the developed world, and when it becomes available to a number of African countries. In this case, I'll just use African countries, but this was also looking at other low and middle income countries. And there was one finding of up to 10 years, in certain cases 5 years, but there were cases where it took even 10 years. So for patients who, and there's no African patient and a patient from the developed world. So because of that, and it was mostly because of fragmented regulatory systems that don't make it easy to introduce the product early enough. And I give you one of the other explanation you can see from that was during the pandemic. Again, you'll hear a lot of examples from the pandemic. Around April 2021, at the height of the pandemic, at the time when we clocked 1 billion doses of COVID vaccines, at that point in time, only 18 million had been injected to people in Africa. That's less than 2%. And someone gave the statistics of what the African population is 20% of the rest of the world. But I also want to add, especially on access, the issue for clinical trials. I think Africa still, just like several other low and middle income countries, hosts disproportionately very few clinical trials. And when we do not have trials happening in the continent, it can also be as an indicator that also those drugs will not be available soon enough to the continent. Of course, on the other side of the argument is when the trials happen, then the patients also need to access the drugs, because then Africa has joined the rest of the world as a platform where trials are done for medication. One other thing, going away from access, is also the issue for capacity building. We draw a lot of parallels between what has happened in the other region, mostly European Union, where, Chair, you have spoken a lot about. But I also do believe that Africa, of course, has to walk the journey, but we don't need to take the many years that European Union has walked. And my conviction is that there has been a lot of work done up to now. You've probably heard the term regional centers of excellence, because AMA is not coming to be started as something completely new. It's a culmination of a lot of work that has been done by many in the room and many outside there, starting from the national health authorities that we already have. And it's also something, at least at this point in time, should address some of the concerns which were observed initially when this idea for AMA came up. AMA is not going to pick up the things that the national agencies were doing. In any case, AMA is going to strengthen what is happening at the country level. And of course, there'll be clear delineation of who does what. But going back to that, we have these regional centers of excellence. AMA will provide a platform that then we can actually put our resources where it really matters. Give you an example. We don't need to create centers for pharmacovigilance expertise in each and every 54 countries. You probably just need to pool the resources that are available in a few regional centers to serve the rest of the continent. And that, I think, it's something very powerful that should also convince us that this is the right way to use the resources we have. And if we do this, actually, we will leapfrog Africa to where the rest of the world is without having to take 50 years to get there. Coming also to the point for creating conducive environment, because one of the things that has been mentioned here is we import a lot of drugs, which is not sustainable. I think also the minister has mentioned that if we have AMA and all the nice things we've spoken about AMA, of course the journey is not going to be as smooth, but we will get there with time. But you create an environment which is very transparent, a predictable environment. And I dare repeat that one of the biggest challenge, especially private sector and industry faces, is lack of prediction capability in the system that is available. And also to remove the fragmentation. Today, if you want to craft a solution for 55 countries, it is way too fragmented not to make sense. But if you combine the efforts, think about local manufacturing. Every country wants to do local manufacturing, granted, and I think it's in the right way to think about being self-sufficient. But we will not all, like someone mentioned, make paracetamol tablets. the one way to make sure that we reach there is have this strong body that regardless of where the medication is made in the continent of Africa, it is of the right standard, it's of the global standard, and then it gets accessed. Today, a product made in country A in Africa and a product made in country B in Africa, these two countries feel, and I don't want to mention the names of the countries, but there is always this perception it's made in the other African country. I'm not so sure how it's been looked at, how it's been evaluated. But imagine when we get to one standard. This drug has been, and we have seen this when you look at the regional, what we call joint assessments now. If you say a product has been assessed through East Africa medicine, we call it ESCMRH, then people start to believe in that more. It's been through, it is acceptable, not only in one country, it's acceptable in 5 countries. Imagine extending that to the rest of the continent. Yeah. It will also help us reach there. So I want to close by saying 2 things also, that to reach there, one very important ingredient is trust. And I think it's easier said than done, that can we trust each other that this will be done? Because it's for everyone. It's for the regulators in the country, it's for the industry, it's for the patients. But we must begin and continue in that journey of building trust. How do you build trust? Let's keep the conversations going. I like the composition of the panel today because it's not regulator, it's not industry, it has everyone, including the student, including the patient. So let's also give each other that chance. Let's listen to each other. Let's listen to each other's concerns. Some we will address, some we may not be able to address. Yeah. And finally, also to take the learnings from the other bodies that are in the continent. The free trade area, it won't work if we don't have common standard, common licenses. The same as CDC. There may be very nice things that we have discussed here from the public health perspective, new innovations coming up, but if there's no one to look at it and give it clean bill of health, then this triangle of CDC, Continental Free Trade, and now Africa Medicines Agency, then won't really work. We have a real chance, and I think we should take it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John. I think what has been really highlighted was that with the African Union, it did a lot of the work, foundation building. And you know, as with foundations, because they don't rise up, they're in the ground, people don't see them, they don't notice them. But when you come to build the infrastructure, that's when you appreciate the kind of hard work. I must thank Margaret Nimondo Sikondo from the NEPAD, AU NEPAD AUDA, who did a lot of work in the early stages of building that confidence and educating us patients. He really took us on board like a family, you know, and really guided us through all the processes. What was alleviated our fears. As patients, we wanted to see things well regulated, and one central body regulating it with reliance from others really gave us confidence in that product. And that patient perspective, I think I will now go to the second John, again, John Gikonyo from the NCD Alliance of Kenya. And John, the question we are asking of you is, how do you see AMA improving access to quality, safe, and efficacious medical products for African patients? And then subsequent to that, why is it important to ensure that a framework of engagement with patients and other non-state actors is included in the governance and internal mechanisms of the agency? The reason why I'm saying this is that in Entebbe, when we called upon, we launched the Entebbe statement in 2017. Please do look online, the Entebbe statement from Apple. Point 3 was just this, that we need to be included in there. We don't want a top-down regulatory system we are not relating to. And our Kigali Declaration, which we'll be sharing with you as well, will have the same element again, that we do need to have patients co-producing this new regulatory system. Similar as what's happened in Europe elsewhere. It's good citizenship, it's good democracy, and it is very good order of things. It's about establishing that social contract. John, over to you. How do you see this improving our access? And why do you think it's important to have that framework?
Well, Thank you very much, Kawaldip. And first of all, thank you for giving me an opportunity to represent the patient voice. And I would say this is living true to the spirit of meaningful involvement of patients in matters that concern them. I'll start by saying that the first message I received this morning was from a fellow patient. I'm a kidney patient living with a transplant. And this patient sent me a picture of some drugs he got yesterday, which he has never seen before, and he wanted to know if I have ever seen those drugs and if he should take them. And I'm saying this to demonstrate the kind of anxieties and uncertainties we live with when we rely on drugs from all manner of places and when we are forced to take only what is available. And sometimes we confront drugs that we are not familiar with, we are not sure whether to take them or not. So if we could bring ourselves to a situation whereby in Africa we are able to produce our own drugs of a quality that we are sure, and we know that it is sourced locally with local expertise and local raw materials, then I think that would create more confidence in some of the products that we are required to take. Again, if we're able to produce these drugs locally and regionally, we would save ourselves the inconvenience that is caused, for example, by supply chain disruptions, whereby you require a drug, but for one reason it's not available when you need it because there's a problem where it is sourced, or where it is produced, or it cannot reach you in good time as you expect it to. So local production, regional production would not only build capacity, like the other John has said, but would also ensure faster, rapid deployment of response to situations, medical situations, health situations that need very fast response. I've just learned today that Africa produces 1% of the vaccines that it uses every year. And that means 99% of the vaccines that we use are being produced outside the continent. And this puts us in a very awkward situation whereby we have to wait at the back of the line, like we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic, whereby the countries that had the capacity to produce this vaccine had first of all to ensure and secure vaccines for their own country, their own populations, before Africa could even get a consideration. So I think it is important that we are able to do this production ourselves. We'll also be assured of quality products, and I think the price would also reduce if we are able to produce our own drugs with our own material, locally available materials. Going to the second point of your question, which is the need to involve patients in these processes. I think for all the health products that are going to be produced, all the vaccines, all the medicines, the patient will be the recipient and the end user of this. And there is a need to involve the patient ab initio, from the beginning, so that we know the process, we know what is coming, we know why it is coming. I think in the production of every drug or vaccine or health product, there is a trial period. And this trial can only be done with a patient. And it would not be fair to only bring the patient at the trial stage. The patient would like to know the genesis of the process and also be able to know where it is going. Also, the patient is able to represent the utility aspect of the products that are being produced. What I mean by this is that you may find in some instances, the driving forces in some of these developments are profits and other benefits, and the benefit of the patient is put in the back burner. But if the patient is in the room, if the patient is at the table, he is able to say that, as you produce this product, as you manufacture this product, please make sure that these aspects are taken care of so that we end up with a product of a quality and an efficacy that is serving the purpose that it is supposed to. And the primary purpose is to either cure or manage or control the condition that the patient is living with before we even comes to look in terms of profitability and other aspects. Now, if you look at where the world is going today, the World Health Organization has recently rolled out what they're calling the meaningful involvement of patients and people living with chronic conditions. And this means that there is need to involve patients in every aspect, bring about the notion and idea of co-creation so that we are able to participate in some of these processes. Remember, the term patient only means that I'm living with a condition, but we also have experiences and expertise that we can also use to participate and contribute to some of the therapies, some of the solutions that are being made for us. And therefore, it is important that the patient voice is heard, the patient voice is listened to, and an opportunity is created so that we can also become co-creators in some of the solutions that are being made for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I think this is what John said in the final part is very significant. If you go to any other industry, there the end user is paramount in designing those products, those services, those strategies. Apple computers go over the edge, over the top to bring in the consumer, bring the users in to talk about the next generation. They bring them in, listen to them, and then integrate, and then they get a better result, a better product that really serves the need of the users. It's only in healthcare where we find that disjointed work. The end user is very rarely involved. And you brought out very strategic about vision. My next speaker, as you saw, we had lots of Johns here. And you can imagine John the Baptist as a visionary was inspiring Africa and others. And I think as a kid when I heard of his approach, he was visionary. But John Paul now takes the name of the other element of that, the practical, Paul the practical, Paul the strategic doer, Paul the pusher, Paul the changer, and Paul the sometimes offensive as well, you know. His letters, you look at it, it's amazing. So John Paul brings those vision and that practicality into it. And his topic is well selected. He's not sort of picked randomly. Because we want now John Paul to talk about how will the whole issue of regulatory convergence, whether it's through harmonization or regulatory alliance, how will it guard safety and the speed of access in times of pandemic and in between pandemics. We knew during the pandemic we really needed it. We needed those vaccines quickly. And we couldn't rely on each other, as you saw with the AstraZeneca vaccine. I mean, we were all over the place. Yet the European Medicine Agency had an issue quickly and they all worked together on those directives. So John, over to you. How will increase regulatory convergence, whether it's by to reliance others, speed access in times of pandemic and in times in between those pandemics? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kawaldip, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much again for those kind words. I've never been described as such before. So it's nice to know that that's one of the accolades I would be having. And I think back to your question, I would like to start with the basics. And Africa and Africans have always had proverbs that really pushes towards unity. Proverbs like, when you want to go far, when you want to go fast, you go alone. When you want to go far, you go together, right? Others, like I think in Tanzania, they're talking about 2 ants can always pull, or cannot fail to pull a grasshopper, right? And even, I think another one that I love is that when you cross a river as a crowd, then the crocodile cannot eat you. So why is this really important? Why is this important? Because harmonization is all about that. And today we've had certain terminologies. Regulatory harmonization, we've heard about regulatory convergence, and we've talked about regulatory reliance. And my question is about how will that convergence really help us? So just because we might be using these words with the assumption that we all understand what these things are, they are closely related. So technically, regulatory harmonization, and I want to link it to the convergence, to the questions that has been asked, is generally where we are developing and adopting processes and procedures that really are aligned. And by doing that, when we effectively develop, adapt, and apply those regulatory processes or standards, then we get towards that convergence. So it's technically around doing so within the technical realms, technical guidelines, and not necessarily the legal provisions. So it's the technical provision, technical guidelines. So convergence in itself would then help us strengthen the regulatory capacities and improve coherence across countries. So it means bringing people together to start thinking together in a certain way so that we can improve the way we do things. So why then is doing things in a certain standard way important when we're talking about medical products regulation? And I'll speak to it in several ways, several approaches. Some of them have been mentioned today, but I would like to start with the most important person. Everything we are doing is because of the patient. And I think the last speaker, my fellow John, spoke about some, but I would like to reiterate 2 things. The issue of patient, and at the point of pandemic or even between pandemics, the thing that is most important to do is to move fast, but guarantee safety, right? And we cannot move fast if all of us are doing different things, different ways, and we still expect to move fast and guarantee that safety. So there is no way we can reach there. If we have to learn from the COVID-19 pandemic, somebody once said, we've documented so many lessons, but have we learned from those lessons? That is a very good question to keep reminding ourselves. Are we learning from those lessons from COVID-19? We must learn how to move fast, but by guaranteeing safety. And the only way to do that in Africa is to think as one. We must standardize our guidelines. And when we do that, then we are able to assure the patient that they'll be able to access those medical countermeasures at the earliest time possible. And what does that then mean? It means we are going to save lives, we are going to avoid suffering, because we will be able to attack the illness or address the illness as soon as we can. The second thing is the issue of the safety that I've just mentioned, that the more we are able to rely on each other, because after convergence, the next thing is reliance. We'll be able to rely on our guidelines, our evaluation tools, and that will mean that at the patient point of view, they'll be able to be guaranteed of the safety. And the issue of confidence, a lot of the times during COVID-19, the reason as to why people did not, in some areas, did not take the vaccines as it should have been, is because of the confidence. Can we be able to build the confidence? That confidence can be built when these standards can be understood by the patient themselves. To the industry, and I'll try to move a little bit faster, industries will benefit a lot because of convergence. We will reduce the simplified, the fragmented processes, and also shorten the timelines for product regulation. So why is that important? There's a study that was done by PATH, a modeling study about 2 years ago, and we looked at how what is the health impact of introducing a product 2 years early, and we were looking at dispersible amoxicillin and heat-stable capitocin. And we realized that in just 2 countries, if we introduce those products 2 years earlier than the way they were introduced, we would be able to save more than 39,000 lives. So, but that might not be great for maybe the industry. It might be good for public health professionals. But for the industry, time is money. And the time wasted during regulatory process means wasting more time, wasting more resources. And if we are able to save on that amount of dollar, it means that dollar can be put in more innovation. So what am I saying? That the more we are able to save on time and reduce the time of regulation, we are able to save on some dollar that can go into other innovations that will then save more lives. So it is very important for a patient, for an industry, in terms of the convergence. And for the regulators, it will also increase the levels of capacities to access the complex dossiers. My colleague John said here, when we are able to rely on each other, applying the principle of reliance, it means we don't need every other country having the same kind of skill set, but we can share those resources and we'll be able to speak to each other. And when we deal with complex molecules, like right now, mRNA vaccines and now DNA vaccines are coming in, we do not have that skill set. We would be able to move that pin faster when we are able to create that level of convergence. And most importantly is that we'll also be able to reduce that level of duplication. So what, in conclusion, we all have a responsibility, all of us who are in here. Our countries within the continent are still fragmented and we've not fully aligned. Yet, African Union heads of state have given the mandate that we need to harmonize our policies by providing 2 key documents, the African Union Model Law on Medical Products Regulation and what we've been talking about today a lot, the African Medicines Agency. We need to keep our governments to check to adopt the model law as well as the African Medicines Agency if we have to address and prepare for the current pandemic, in between the pandemics and the pandemic that is coming in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I think John really put, in his concluding remark, he really put that we must fly under the flag of the African Union. Let's fold our national flags and put them away for this one, because it's very important. Also, let's support the agency as one unified body that can work for all of us. As John has said, dispersing centers of excellence and using that, as Professor Amani had said, let's work on that. Let not the power, the knowledge sit in one center where it cannot do good. Let's disperse it. It's like your quality of your mercy. It must reign everywhere. Good practice must reign. And I think something else that John Paul was hinting on was the benefits which we haven't talked about here in that extent to which we should be now. It's time. Time is very valuable. In a pandemic, you don't have that time. You're now either control it dead now, else it disappears. And I think your metaphor that if many cross together, the crocodile doesn't get you, is on Masai Mara, the strategies adopted by, it's a nice paper, it's a Harvard MBA student who wrote it, that the strategies that the lions adopt, the lions always sit on the start of where the wildebeest are going to enter the river or at the exit. Those are the fattest lions, by the way. Because if you leave them at those 2 strategic points, that they then disappear. It's out of control. You have to then work more effort. You spend more time chasing them down and get less in return. So that's for the African agencies. Conserve that time. Do it quickly. Do it now. That will show in benefit and get those patients in. Now the last, it wasn't by accident we put this last. It was well thought of last. Because this is where we are now ending this day and reflecting on this. When the pandemic happened, many of our political leaders, and we all agreed, shame on the pandemic, you know. Once in a lifetime. Well, it's God's will, you know, it's happened. And I think every political leader also put up his hand and said, not my problem, you know. There's no problem, this is not my problem. It happened to everybody. But if it happens twice, then shame on all of us. Because we were talking here, we were here in Kigali, we were saying it, and I think this social media record will go and saying again, it will happen. In 2017, this was exactly what we had been saying in Entebbe. Have this now, because it's important for us patients. The next speaker will now talk about that. It's Jacqueline. She knows the subject inside out, and she will look at the security issue, health system strengthening. What are the lessons we learned from COVID, and how health security in Africa could be improved and boosted if we have that, not only AMA, but also that pharmaceutical regulatory harmonization in Africa. Jacqueline, over to you. You have a huge time now. Sorry to put you pressure, but this is your time now to make sure we don't come back and say shame on us.
That's okay. All right. With the risk of repeating what my fellow really abled panelists have talked about, I'll try and keep it very brief, especially because I know time is ticking for us to be on time for the coming match. So I want to look at it in terms of all the missed opportunities we had. If we had AMA in place, what are some of the benefits we would have had as a continent to ensure that we had safe medical products, that we benefited from having a central regulatory system on the continent? And I think one of the things that really we really failed on is on how we were able to make decisions around that. And I say that because in as far as timely decision making is concerned, because if you remember well, when we started off, there was scarcity of the vaccines, and a lot of times Africa had to wait at the back of the queue for us to be able to access the much needed medical commodities, whether we are talking about the diagnostics, the vaccines, the therapeutics, anything that was needed at that point. So one of the things that we really didn't benefit on was timely decision making, and I want to compare this with countries that had proper regulatory mechanisms in place, and try and expand that to what that would look like at a continental level. And I want to give the example of Morocco that participated in some of the clinical trials that happened on the continent. The fact that they participated in that, they had an opportunity to build trust in their communities. The communities trusted the science in the country, and therefore they were able to get into good deals and they were able to access Sinopharm, while the rest of us waited for WHO to make a decision on what came on the continent. The fact that they were able to get the vaccines that were not, being rushed for by every other country in the world meant that they were able to reach the numbers that they needed to reach on a timely basis, while the rest of us were still waiting on queue to get the vaccine that was much needed. So a lack of a central regulatory body means that we cannot make our decisions in a timely manner. And therefore we are not able to protect our communities that we're able to, that like we should or like we would like to do. A lack of a central regulatory body also means that sometimes the commodities that come onto our continent are not fit for context. I want to again go back to the vaccine story, because we got one vial, one dose vaccines, good, but how does that impact the rest of the health commodities that we have in our cold chain facilities, in the health facilities that we are working in? It means that one dose, one vial occupied so much space in some of our fridges that it hampered our ability to stock the amount of childhood vaccinations that we needed, and as far as cold chain is concerned. So quite a bit of that. So I think part of what we want to do is have that regulatory body so that anything that's coming onto the continent is something that is fit for context. That is just one of them. We also missed opportunity to trade with each other, and I say this from experience because we had a lot of investment on the continent from the development partners as well as from our own governments to really procure medical commodities when we needed them most at the peak of the pandemic. Some of our countries were producing these medical commodities, but anytime we tried to procure from these countries, it became very difficult to send them over to another country. They were rejected, not once, not twice, because most of us rely on WHO regulatory, standards. And if these particular products are not approved by WHO, it means Kenya will not import them. So we have capacity to produce on the continent, but we cannot trade with each other. And that's really unfortunate, because if we cannot trade in each other, it means we cannot even grow our economy. Some of these medical commodities depend on economies of scale for us to sustain business. If we have business on the continent, it means we can sustain the industries that we have. We benefit the larger ecosystem, because more production means more of us are on the job. It means bigger economies. It means we're able to allocate more to health. It means we're able to address other social determinants of health in the countries that we're living in. So again, a missed opportunity. We also missed opportunity to build trust amongst our communities, because sometimes when these clinical trials are conducted by our own academia, by our own students in our universities, then it means we have trust in these commodities. Our communities trust these commodities. Our healthcare workers trust these commodities. Our government's ministries of health also trust these commodities. Without trust, then we see a lot of hesitation once these vaccines or these medical commodities are introduced in our countries. Without trust, then it means we cannot get to where we want to be. And that's part of the reason why Africa right now is trending at 25% coverage, while the rest of the world is already talking about 65%. Yet the vaccines are here with us. It's because of the hesitancy we saw. It's because we could not access them on time, because we had to be back on the line. We could not, and when they came here, because of the mistrust that we had, we saw a lot of them expire. I think we already have about 22 million vaccine doses expiring on the continent right now. And that's why we are lagging behind in as far as the COVID vaccination is concerned. And COVID is only one of the health emergencies that we're dealing with on the continent. Yesterday when we started off, WHO mentioned that on a weekly basis, they have about 150 health emergencies that they're tracking on the continent. So if there's anything we learned from COVID, is that it's obviously important that we put our act together and make sure that we can support any research that is going on the country, that we involve our citizens on the citizen research, so that the commodities that are being brought into our countries are fit for context, that they're the things that we need. I think part of what we've been talking about is the neglect that we have on some of the tropical diseases that affect us. Yesterday during the presentation, there was barely anything to say about Lassa fever. And yet it's one of the conditions that has been endemic on the continent for a very, very long time. Having a regulatory body means that we are going to be able to prioritize the things that affect us. We are going to focus on those kind of illnesses. We are going to conduct clinical trials around that. We'll have trust, and we'll have medical commodities that we need on a timely basis. So looking forward, I think what we want to do is push as much as possible and have as many actors on the table as we should. I think right here we have very different categories of stakeholders that we need on the table, because we want a One Africa approach. One Africa approach means we have that AMA should be in place. Once we have AMA in place, then it becomes very clear what each one of these stakeholders needs to be doing to ensure that AMA is operationalized. There's a very strong role for civil society, for example, because we'll be able to advocate for our governments. Right now we have about, 33 out of the 54 that we want to ratify that treaty. And if all countries are not on board, it means we cannot make decisions as we should, that we cannot have the right structural mechanisms that we need. We will not have the board, we will not have the other operational documents that we need to operationalize AMA. That we're not going to have enough funding investment for AMA. Without funds, we don't get anywhere. So I think the first thing that the CSO community, I speak as CSO because I work for AMREF, is really advocate for our governments to ratify, so that we have as many of them on that. We put the right structures on board, make decisions around that, build trust within our communities, and I believe by the time if it ever happens, I think it's very clear that health emergencies are here to stay, then we are going to be in a better position as a continent to have the right medical commodities that we have that are fit for context, that speak to our health issues that we have on the continent, and at the end of the day, build the regulatory environment that we need at a continental level as well as at the country level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's excellent. Before we go to the closing remarks by the president of Rwanda Medical Association, Dr. David Netrusha, and also final remarks I have to reserve for our vice chair, Alice Lazzoni, who will be as a chair-elect, and he will be in place by the next EGM, leading Africa forward. So it will be a great pride to have him. We'll have him say something. I've got a couple of minutes for one question that I will put to all the panels. Question, okay, I'll take first here and then second there. Anyone with a mic? I just went, she's coming. I just hold on, let everybody hear that. Here. Yeah, so I'm done there.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for the very interesting feedback and for the topic itself. And of course, we're all very optimistic about the AMA being established. So I only want to stress on one or two things that I think are really very important. As much as we're seeking the One Africa and the independence, it's the resilience and the security as well. So I mean, we should be very strict about the safety and the security of what we're doing. Because sometimes, and according to different circumstances, emergencies or non-emergencies, these are things that have to be put in place. And for this, there should be proper monitoring as well. So I was thinking when you were all talking about the structures that are needed to support the AMA, maybe monitoring board, maybe. And another thing, and it's because every day we have different innovatives. So what about the innovatives? What are you going to adopt or adapt? So we are going to need like a health technology assessment system or function that would support as well the innovatives as per all of the needed evidence and as per the needs and priorities as we're moving on. And this as well is going to, in a nutshell, needed a well-strengthened, resilient procurement and supply system that have to be in place. And I mean, these are things that we have to think of as we are moving ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you've really brought something to the head.
Yes.
You brought something to the head. The close cooperation in Europe now between European Medicines Agency and EU NET HTA. They're working together soon. So I will start with, again, Jacqueline, your question was fielded on your health security and innovations. What would you say to this? Would you put...
Yes, and I think we'll have to split responsibility well at it, because I think for our countries to also trust the role of AMA in this, I think they'll want to see what their role is going to be in as far as monitoring implementation is going to be concerned. So I think really good comment. I think it will be good that this is spelled out even as we try to operationalize AMA, and also very critical that there's a very clear role on what the countries are going to play in as far as actualizing that.
Thank you very much. Anyone want to answer that? Any more?
I think the other thing, and I get your point, is also to take this step by step. I did mention trust building. It's not something that just comes. We must continuously work together. There are some things we'll be able to do early on. Others will take a bit of time to reach there. Let's use the things that we are able to work on now to be a stepping stone to the next level of, because we also don't want to run so fast and lose it and lose the agenda that we have. So we walk at the steps that we should take, but surely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's a good warning for I know it all, you know. The second speaker, could you please?
Thank you. My name is Ethel Makila. I'm from Ayavi. John, one of the Johns, and Jacqueline both mentioned clinical trials, not John the Baptist, the other John. The AMA is looking at harmonizing regulatory processes at the end tail of vaccine and medicine products development. But John and Jacqueline, you both mentioned the need for the clinical trials, and indeed, it is a very important, product development is an important part of vaccine, of our self-reliance in vaccine development, in vaccine access, in medicinal products access. We have few clinical trials on the continent. We have challenges in clinical trials oversight and regulations. What, if anything, are we doing in as much as we are pursuing AMA, the end-tail regulatory processes? What are we doing for the earlier stage research, clinical trials on the continent?
Okay, thank you much. I think I'll tip the first before I go to the panel. I think one of the most important reasons we have answered the question, why should we be taking our own EU-wide clinical trials? This continent is rich in genome and phenotype. You look at our cells. I'm classified as the 44th tribe in Kenya. Yeah? So I include from the Cape, the Boer community, the African community as one tribe, and to Cairo, where Professor Mani comes, the Arabic communities. Between them and us, there's a huge genome phenotype, which could benefit the world because each body behaves differently. We have got things with the Baka community in our jungles who have really good aspects. We need all these people in there to try the drugs so that at the end, the drugs that come out are suited for us. That's why we need first. We don't need anybody to tell us anything other than that. It's for us. The second question now, over to anyone who wants to take over that. Professor Mani?
Okay, one of the discoveries I found during participation in this conference is that we are not knowing each other. We are not thinking as Pan-Africanism. Okay, we are decided on what we have on hands, what we know about our neighbors. I would like to ensure that we have enough clinical trial centers in Africa. If you include North Africa as Africa, okay, as part of the Africa, we have clinical trial centers within the universities in North Africa. So everything is here. I would like to use the comment of one of the professors when I studied in Oldenburg. He told us, you have to run if you would like to maintain your achievements. So you have to think what you have to do if you would like to have more achievements. And I would like to add for his comment from my experience in life that if you would like to have more achievements, you have to find the proper stakeholders, because stakeholders make the shortcut. And this is the magic of stakeholders, of course. So when we try to think about any problem or any challenge for AMA, we have to think within the Africa, within the continent, where I can find the solution, and we will find it within Africa. So it's very important, and this is my message for the recommendation for the conference as a whole and for this session, that we have to consider AMA as a platform for and center of information, like David mentioned before, so we can know the strengths, where we can find the strengths, where we can find something in the north and east and center and so on. Because actually our diversity in this continent is our pure strength, and we should use it, because so far we didn't use it actually. And if we use it, we can find a solution. And before I finish, I would like to add a comment that I heard this morning, that tomorrow is ready for he who is prepared today. So I think it's very important to take the momentum of this conference and to make a profitable time for starting the execution of AMA. And I always say to my students, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And actually, AMA have all the potential to start as a great one. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else to take that over? No?
I just wanted to make a little comment about, like I say, some of these things are already in place, but they are now culminating at AMA, and probably have heard about AVAREF. It probably is not yet optimum. That's one of the things that's trying to harmonize and make the conduct of trials a little bit better than it has been. There are still some, let's say, loose ends, things like going to the ethics review board, which are spread all over. And in most jurisdictions, you don't even know which one to go to. So those things are still there. But this is what then will be built up into AMA. So we'll not be starting from scratch. And I think that will be one of the catalysts to see more studies coming into the continent of Africa. Because if you do not do the clinical trials, you can almost predict also the access to the drugs and the medicines and the vaccines will also be an issue. So that is something I think we should all support and make things easy, especially things that will not necessarily only happen at AMA because there are other stakeholders involved. I just talked about ethics board review because that's one of the concerns that currently affects the study infrastructure in the continent.
John Paul.
Just very quick response. I think when we talk about health research and development and specifically looking at the clinical trials, when I was speaking earlier, I talked about the African Union Model Law on Medical Products Regulation. AMA did not come from space. There are things that have been happening at the country, and even now, right now, the dance will be at the country level, even though we are doing all this from country, regional, to continental. One of the 8 principles of the AU model law is the regulation of clinical trials. So if an entity, a regulator, has achieved maturity level 3, within that law, they will be regulating clinical trials. And why is that important? Because it's going to spur and catalyze the R&D that is in that area. And right now, as we are talking about precision medicine and trying to look at the African gene pool, it is really important that we start looking at what is it that Africa has and how can we bring in the clinical trials, the research that needs to happen in Africa for the sake of providing products that are fit for purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So one comment here.
Thank you very much. It's just a comment. I would like to congratulate all panelists. I'm quite sure and happy to see Africans engage for AMA. It is very important for us. And to tell all of you, we are working on the operationalization. We have the first state parties conference to designate the country done. Now we are working on the board of AMA, because the board, if the board will be in place, the board will decide the criteria to designate the director, the staff. And we agreed, member state agreed that we should go gradually. We cannot start strong. No. Yes, we will go gradually, and we are working on that one. And I would like to ensure all of you that we are supporting, and we can see you are also supporting. We are sure that African Union support the process, and to be sure that we strengthen accountability partnership for sound regulatory system in Africa. That one is very important. And I would like to reaffirm that as a commissioner, we need to build existing structure. You talk about that one. We want to go, something is in the ground.
We need to harmonize all these things and to provide a solid foundation of AMA. And I can see that one is very sure. And to tell you, AMA will complete CDC Africa. CDC is doing fantastic job, but AMA will complete, but we will go gradually. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's the point I was trying to raise. The AMA is the other side of the coin of CDC. Now let me summarize and then I will ask the closing remarks. We just found that it's been a great marathon getting this AMA on place. We saw great effort being made. We also saw that a lot of give and take had to take place, a lot of trust has to develop. We're also glad to see that the agency has come to Kigali, a very befitting place in the heart of Africa. We also realize that a lot more needs to be done. And I think on the clinical trials at the end, something that hasn't been mentioned is rare diseases that are particularly affecting our populations, especially with sickle cell disease. These are not put on the agenda of any researchers because nobody prioritizes that. With AMA, we will prioritize our own diseases. We will choose which battles to fight, which drugs to develop, not help support the rest of the world develop drugs for their population. We want AMA to help us develop drugs for our population. And then I think the point was that a lot more needs to be done and we will work together. Our next steps is that we will have the proceedings put online, plus also our declaration, just like the Entebbe declaration, we will be sending that around. Please have a look and sign on to that, and we could make that work for everybody. I think, as I said, AMA has been a marathon, but we now need sprinters. We need sprinters to finish this race, because we can't wait any longer, because the decisions are out of our hand. The next pandemic is around the corner and we want to be ready. So could I now ask my two speakers, Alice Ladzeni, our Vice Chair, to come on board here, and I will ask the President of the Rwanda Medical Association to step up with him. Alice, proceed.
Good evening, distinguished delegates. I feel greatly honored to stand before you this evening. I would like to express my deep gratitude to the host, the Rwandan government, for the excellent hospitality which you have given us. My gratitude also goes to the African Union, represented here by the Commissioner, the panelists, various partner organizations, and you, the participants. From the patient community, the combined community commitment, which I've seen here to see AMA up and running, has given us pride and confidence. AMA will indeed save lives and reduce the unnecessary death from our vulnerable communities. Let us therefore continue this momentum until we reach our destination. Pandemics are still with us. For example, we already have the AMR amidst us. So, no need to fold hands. Time is not on our side. Lastly, I wish to urge remaining member countries to ratify the treaty so that all countries move together. With these remarks, I once again wish to thank you for your attendance and the firm commitment demonstrated here. I thank you for your attention and have a blessed evening. Thank you.
David?
Distinguished guests, it's an honor and a privilege to be here and to have been part of this exceptional event. I would say this is a very exceptional first, because this is my first time as a medical doctor to have been participating in an event talking about health-related issues, specifically related to medicine and drugs, and the moderator is a patient. This really has been a very unique experience for me, and I really did appreciate that. I like that. As healthcare providers, as medical doctors, most of the time we know that to be able to give the right care to the patient, we need to put ourselves into the shoes of patient themselves. And one of the main challenges we face as medical doctors in Rwanda is related to drugs and medications. It's really a nightmare when a medical doctor sees a patient who have struggled to reach the health facility and struggled even to meet the qualified healthcare providers, and at the end, the doctor is not able to get the right drug, or there are different issues like resistance, or you are aware that you might face the issue of falsified drugs. We have taken that because we also have the coalition of National Medical Association, where we discuss within African continent about this challenge, and really medication issue is one of the huge challenges we face. I want really to congratulate all our panelists. What diversity. We have really a diverse group. We've seen students being present, we have seen academia, we have seen patient representative, we have seen industry. This shows that we are ready to go together as a team. They really put us through the important matters related to establishment of African Medicine Agency. We all now understand how important it is to have an African Medicine Agency, especially to make sure that we are ready and prepared to fight against any future pandemic, but also the pandemic we are still in today. We have had also the importance of having an African Medicine Agency in making sure that national medical regulatory agencies, which we already know that are in place, can just be able to collaborate and be more efficient and effective. This is really quite important. And even countries which do not have strong regulatory bodies will just be supported through the African Medicine Agency once it gets established. I was also very happy and we were very pleased also to hear from the panelists some of the most important requirements to make sure that the AMA is functional and effective. The finance is very important, but also human capital is also very important to make sure that we reach what we need. The COVID-19 pandemic have taught us a lot, and I would say that if we had AMA before COVID-19 pandemic was here, we would not be having possibly more regret on having faced the issues we've seen. We've seen issues such as mistrust, misinformation, and at the same time, inequitable distribution of medication, vital drugs, vital vaccine when they were even available. All of this possibly should have been taken care much better if we had an African Medicine Agency. The agency, of course, is above only the pandemic. As we know, our continent faces a lot of poor health outcome, access to care, and many health indicators are really very poor. We face that as healthcare providers, and we see this as really a huge challenge. Some of them include lack of access to medicines, access to availability of forced medicine, and also sometimes using traditional medicine inappropriately, which we know are really potential opportunities of possibly being some of the solution if we have the right regulatory bodies. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope that having had the importance of having the AMA and having seen how the progress is, we really need to appreciate and thank the African Union member states which have really supported this initiative, and all of you who are here, and we hope that possibly in the near future we'll just meet celebrating a very strong African Medicine Agency in place with headquarters, with qualified human capital, which will just be ready to put us forward and make all African people safe and in a better health. I thank you so much. Right.
Thank you. With that, thank you very much. Now to free you off to go and watch the game, just one point and mark that we know this is work in progress. We are still defining this elephant that is the African Medicines Agency. We are going around it and feeling it, and we will soon have a definition what it is. But please, your job now is to take this message from Cape to Cairo, from Cape to Cairo. I know the Tunisians will say we disagree that Ras Saka is the most northern part. We'll give it to them. So from there, from Cape to Ras Saka or Cairo, please spread this message that we do need this African agency. Tomorrow, please ratify the treaty. We need 55 countries on this. We want also this message to spread from Cape Verde to Mauritius. We want them all in there. And you as an individual, change makers, you are influencers. I'm sure you've got social media profiles. Please go and spread this knowledge that this is one opportunity for us to do something really great. And it goes back to Kwame Nkrumah's dream that we have a Pan-African series of institutions. And this with CDC is what we need. The pandemic, fear not, we will tackle it. If we are unified, they mean nothing. Thank you.
Everyone has the right to effective healthcare and a well-functioning health system. Africa has made great strides in accelerating the major challenge of increasing access to medicines through various public health interventions. However, about half of the population in the poorest places still do not have access to safe, efficacious, and quality medical products. Local pharmaceutical production remains low, with only about 2% of consumed medicines being locally manufactured in Africa. About 25 to 30% of medical products are substandard and falsified, and illicit trade in pharmaceutical drugs remains persistent. This poses a series of threats to public health. Now, more than ever, it's time for change that will ensure African people have quality of life, sound health, and well-being, a priority area in the African Union Agenda 2063. The African Medicines Agency, or AMA Treaty, was endorsed in February 2019 by African heads of state as part of the journey towards an internationally recognized and well-established regulatory authority on the continent. As an organ of the African Union, legally mandated by member states, AMA's goal is to increase the availability of safe and affordable medicines and other health products on the continent. This will be achieved through providing regulatory oversight of selected medical products, as well as promoting regional and national cooperation and harmonization of regulatory decisions. AMA will also support the growth of local pharmaceutical companies, opening up and expanding markets across Africa, which is one of the key objectives of the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Working across 55 AU member states, regional economic communities, and regional health organizations, the African Medicines Agency will coordinate and strengthen ongoing regulatory harmonization in the following ways. Firstly, AMA will evaluate medical products for the treatment of priority diseases as determined by the African Union. It will also regularly inspect, coordinate, and share information about products that are authorized for marketing. AMA will coordinate joint reviews of clinical trials applications for vaccines, assessment of highly complex product dossiers such as biosimilars. AMA will also coordinate joint inspections of active pharmaceutical ingredients, API manufacturing sites. By developing common standards and regulations, AMA will also be responsible for harmonizing legislation. For the health and well-being of our people, let us take this further by establishing the African Medicines Agency. AMA must be ratified by at least 15 member states in order for it to come into force. We call on all African governments to ratify the AMA Treaty and endorse the transformation of our continent's pharmaceutical industry and health systems. With this support, the establishment of AMA will reach fruition. Contact the African Union for more information